Austin's streets shimmered under the warm golden glow of the street lamps, their light dancing across the wet asphalt after an early evening drizzle. The city, known for its vibrant music scene and late-night energy, seemed alive, almost breathing, in a way that was both comforting and deceptively serene. From open doors and windows, the faint strains of guitars, drums, and the occasional hum of a piano leaked into the streets, mingling with laughter, the distant honk of taxis, and the low, steady rumble of traffic weaving through the downtown core. The air smelled faintly of rain-soaked asphalt mixed with hints of street food, tacos from corner vendors, the earthy aroma of coffee from 24-hour cafes, and the lingering scent of wet grass from the nearby parks. To an outsider, it might have seemed like any other night in Austin, a city alive and awake, embracing its nocturnal rhythm with an effortless charm. Yet beneath the apparent vibrancy, there was an undercurrent, subtle but undeniable, a tension that seemed to seep from the darkened alleys and shadowed corners where the neon lights faded into darkness. The kind of tension that made the hairs at the nape of the neck rise, a premonition that something unseen was quietly watching. On that night, she had left a friend's house just past midnight, the laughter of the evening still lingering in her voice, the warmth of companionship evident in her casual smile. Her hand waved over her shoulder in a final, carefree gesture, oblivious to the fact that the city, in all its glowing life, was not entirely benign. She walked along familiar streets, the rhythm of her steps syncing with the soft patter of distant rain that had left the streets slick and reflective, creating long, liquid mirrors that doubled the lamplight and the shadows, making the familiar unfamiliar, and every corner a potential hiding place for danger. The wind whispered through the trees lining the narrow streets, stirring leaves in a way that sounded almost alive, as if carrying hushed conversations or secret warnings meant only for her ears. The branches cast shifting, twisted shadows across brick walls and cracked sidewalks, morphing with every flicker of passing light from cars or neon signs. Each step she took was absorbed by the quiet murmur of the city, a city that by day was welcoming, bustling, and vibrant, yet by night seemed to pulse with a subtle, hidden menace. She breathed in the humid night air, thick with the scent of rain, dust, and the faint tang of city life, a mix of organic and artificial smells, from wet leaves to exhaust fumes. Every inhalation was comforting in its familiarity, yet the tiny, almost imperceptible details pricked at the edges of her consciousness. A shadow lingering too long in a doorway, the sudden scuff of shoes on wet pavement that didn't belong to anyone she could see, the faint metallic taste of tension that seemed to cling to the air like a static charge. Her mind flitted briefly over thoughts of the night, the conversation with friends, plans for the coming week, the minor frustrations of everyday life, but these thoughts were punctured by a sudden, instinctual unease that she could not explain. A prickling sensation ran down her spine, subtle yet persistent, urging her to glance over her shoulder, to quicken her pace. The city's normal nocturnal sounds, the far-off wail of a siren, the low hum of a distant train, the occasional clatter of trash cans tipping over in an alley suddenly felt amplified, as if each sound carried a hidden meaning, a warning she could not decipher. She reassured herself, attributing the sensation to imagination or a touch of overactive nerves after a long night of laughter and alcohol, yet the tension lingered, persistent and unshakable. Every familiar landmark, the corner coffee shop, the mural painted in bright pastels, the row of small boutiques appeared subtly altered under the night's dim glow, elongated, distorted, and oddly menacing. The interplay of light and shadow transformed ordinary objects into shapes that suggested movement where there was none. A trash bag fluttering in the wind became the shape of a crouching figure. A distant pedestrian, briefly illuminated by a car's headlights, seemed to disappear before her eyes. She felt the city's pulse beneath her feet, a rhythmic, almost sentient beat that both comforted and unnerved, as though the streets themselves were alive and aware, observing every footstep, every choice, every breath. The quiet corners, where the neon glow failed to penetrate, were especially foreboding. The alleys, littered with remnants of daily life, crumpled newspapers, discarded bottles, splashes of graffiti, seemed to hold their own stories. They whispered, imperceptibly, through the rustle of wind, a language she did not understand but felt in the tightening of her chest. Shadows gathered at odd angles, creating shapes that seemed to shift when she looked away, corners that seemed to close in, and doorways that concealed unseen eyes. The city's vibrancy was a mask, a veneer that concealed latent menace, waiting patiently, almost sentiently, for the perfect moment to act. She continued walking, her steps unhurried but measured, each step carrying her deeper into this shifting tapestry of light, shadow, and tension. The rhythm of her heart, beating in her ears, seemed suddenly louder than the ambient sounds of the city, a personal metronome marking the approach of an unseen presence. Every so often, a stray cat would dart across the sidewalk, eyes glinting in the lamplight, and for a brief moment, her mind imagined it not as an animal, but as a harbinger, a fleeting omen of things to come. Her breathing grew slightly faster, almost involuntary, as if her body had begun to sense the gravity of the approaching storm before her conscious mind had caught up. In this moment, Austin was both home and wilderness, comforting and alien, familiar yet full of hidden threats. The warmth of streetlights and the chatter of late-night diners clashed with the primal, instinctual awareness that danger lurked, invisible yet real. Every shadow seemed to whisper, every flicker of movement hinted at unseen eyes, every distant sound carried potential menace. And in the midst of this, she moved forward, unknowingly, into the night's embrace, stepping closer to an encounter that would forever alter the rhythm of her life, and the streets that had once seemed so safe. By the time she reached the corner of an alley she had passed dozens of times before without incident, the city's subtle warning had become a tangible tension in her chest. The wind died briefly, leaving only the faint echo of distant music and the soft splash of puddles beneath her shoes. It was a moment suspended in time, the calm before a storm she could not yet see, a pause that carried within it the weight of unseen malice. The night seemed to hold its breath, and in that silence, fear waited. She approached the narrow alley she had long avoided, a path tucked between two aging brick buildings whose walls bore the marks of time, peeling paint, faint graffiti, and the occasional moss-stained crack that suggested neglect. The glow from the street lamps outside barely reached this corner, leaving it steeped in shadow. The alley smelled of damp earth, decaying leaves, and something faintly metallic, the kind of scent that always made her stomach tighten without warning. Every step she took echoed softly against the walls, the sound magnified by the confined space, reverberating back in a rhythm that seemed almost deliberate, almost sentient. At first, she thought the figure ahead was merely another late-night wanderer, perhaps a worker leaving the nearby bars or a homeless man seeking shelter for the night. But instinct pricked at her mind like a needle, an uneasy chill ran down her spine as she felt the air around her shift, heavier, denser, as if compressed by the presence of someone watching her every movement. Her heartbeat quickened, a soft thudding in her ears, and her steps faltered for a fraction of a second. The figure remained perfectly still, blending seamlessly with the darkness, yet radiating an unnatural weight, a tension that made the space around him feel constricted, suffocating, as though the alley itself had become a trap. She considered turning back, rationalizing that the alley was just a shortcut she didn't need to take, but pride, familiarity, and the faint hope that nothing would happen pushed her forward. The pavement beneath her shoes was slick, reflecting shards of light from the distant street lamps and making every step treacherous, forcing her to focus on balance while ignoring the creeping terror that coiled in her stomach. The figure did not move, did not breathe audibly, yet she could feel its presence like a shadow pressing against her consciousness. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, yet a strange paralysis gripped her limbs, a momentary freeze in the face of sudden danger. Then, without warning, the figure lunged. Time seemed to stretch, elongated and distorted, as if the alley itself had slowed to watch. She reacted instinctively, stepping back, raising her arms, a scream caught in her throat before it could escape. Panic erupted like a wildfire, chaotic and uncontrollable, her body flailing in a desperate attempt to escape. The shadows absorbed her movements, turning her frantic struggle into a blurred, almost surreal dance of limbs and motion. A metallic clang resonated, a trash can tipping, perhaps, or something far worse, and the figure was suddenly upon her. From outside the alley, a few late-night pedestrians glimpsed fleeting movement, flashes of dark clothing and limbs, a struggle so fast that no one could truly comprehend what was happening. One witness later reported seeing a scarf or piece of cloth fluttering briefly, caught on a protruding pipe, before disappearing again into the night. Another saw only shadows shift unnaturally and a vague, human-shaped blur vanish into the deeper darkness. By the time anyone could react, it was over. The alley swallowed the scene entirely, leaving nothing but silence and the faint echo of chaos. The encounter was violent, abrupt, and deeply disorienting. The air was thick with the sharp, metallic tang of adrenaline, sweat, and fear. Her hands scraped against the rough brick wall, nails tearing, leaving small, stinging cuts. Footsteps pounded against the wet pavement, each slap against concrete reverberating through the alley like a drumbeat. She tried to scream again, but the sound seemed trapped, absorbed by the oppressive darkness around her. Panic surged through every fiber of her being, a pure, primal fear that left no room for rational thought. Every instinct screamed to fight or flee, yet her body moved awkwardly, as though weighed down by the oppressive force of the unseen. Eventually, the struggle ended as suddenly as it began. She stumbled forward, heart hammering, chest heaving, her body trembling uncontrollably. The alley fell silent once more, save for the distant hum of traffic and the whisper of wind through the debris-strewn corners. She collapsed against the damp brick wall, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The scarf she had been wearing was torn, caught on a jagged edge of brick, a smear of dark, sticky liquid clung to the alley floor, subtle yet unmistakably sinister. Her mind raced, trying to process the event, but all that remained was confusion, terror, and the sharp awareness that she had survived an encounter meant to terrorize, if not worse. Even as she struggled to regain her composure, she noticed tiny, horrifying details: the faint scuff marks where her shoes had slid on wet asphalt, the imprints of fingers along the edge of a metal door frame, and the slight depression in the puddle where someone had pressed a shoe. Each small piece of evidence told a story, a brutal narrative of struggle and intent. The alley seemed to breathe around her, alive with the memory of violence, a silent witness to the terror that had unfolded. The shadows no longer felt empty but crowded with unseen eyes, echoing the threat that had vanished too quickly to fully comprehend. Later, investigators piecing together the scene would find these subtle traces, each one a fragment of the chaos that had passed: a torn scarf snagged on brick, faint shoe imprints, and a dark smear that defied easy explanation. The psychological residue of the encounter, the sense of being watched, hunted, and violated, lingered far longer than the physical evidence, imprinting itself on the minds of witnesses and the community. The alley had become a symbol of vulnerability, a stark reminder that the city, for all its lights and music, concealed dangers in its shadows. The encounter marked a turning point, not only in her life but in the city itself. What had seemed like an ordinary night of walking home became a defining moment of fear and uncertainty. Every familiar alley, every darkened corner, every reflection in a puddle could now hold the potential for violence. The city's vibrant energy was tainted by the knowledge that beneath its surface, malevolence could lurk unnoticed, striking suddenly and leaving permanent scars on those it touched. She had escaped, but the encounter had left an indelible imprint, a lingering terror, a memory that would haunt every step she took in the streets of Austin from that night forward. By the early morning hours following the disappearance, Austin's streets felt different, heavier, tense, almost suspended in a state of anxious anticipation. The night had left its mark, not only on the alley where the encounter had occurred but on the city itself, which now seemed to pulse with an uneasy awareness. News of the incident had begun to circulate through neighbors, local businesses, and social media, sparking a wave of alarm and confusion. Friends of the missing woman called repeatedly, leaving frantic messages that filled answering machines and cell phones. Each unanswered call compounded the fear, layering panic upon anxiety, turning ordinary neighborhoods into spaces of heightened vigilance. Families peered out windows, their eyes scanning every shadow, listening for unusual sounds, their imaginations filling the silent gaps with the worst possible scenarios. Police arrived quickly, mobilized in full force, and began their systematic investigation. Uniformed officers patrolled the surrounding streets, talking to neighbors, canvassing the area for witnesses, and taking notes on even the smallest details. Detectives, dressed in plain clothes, moved deliberately, measuring distances, photographing the alley from multiple angles, and searching for anything that could serve as evidence. The initial examination revealed subtle but telling clues: a faint scuff mark on the wet pavement that suggested a hurried struggle, a jagged tear in a scarf caught on a brick edge, and a small dark stain near a puddle, possibly blood, though it would require lab analysis. Each fragment of evidence was meticulously documented, photographed, and bagged for forensic testing, but the absence of definitive fingerprints or DNA made the trail frustratingly elusive. Surveillance cameras from nearby businesses were examined frame by frame, the police painstakingly rewinding and analyzing footage that often offered little more than fleeting shapes and shadows. One camera caught a blurry figure darting into the alley for a mere second before vanishing again. Another captured a faint reflection in a wet window, a coat, a hood, a fleeting movement, but the image was too unclear to identify anything with certainty. Detectives cross-referenced timestamps, compared it with phone records, and retraced her last known steps in an effort to reconstruct the timeline. Every detail mattered: the time she left her friend's house, the intervals at which she was seen on street cameras, the fleeting glimpses reported by late-night pedestrians. Even the smallest anomalies, a misaligned trash can, a faint shoe imprint near a corner, or a dropped personal item, became crucial pieces of the puzzle. Throughout the day, investigators canvassed neighbors, questioning anyone who might have heard or seen something unusual. Residents reported minor details: the hum of a car idling too long, the soft clatter of something tipping over in the alley, a shadow that moved in an unusual way. Each report was treated with utmost seriousness. In cases like this, even seemingly trivial observations could break the case open. Detectives listened, asked follow-up questions, and meticulously compared each account, knowing that memory could be unreliable, but patterns sometimes emerged from consistency in independent testimonies. The community, meanwhile, felt the weight of uncertainty pressing in on them. Fear became a pervasive presence, infiltrating daily routines. Parents checked on children more frequently, neighbors exchanged guarded warnings, and even casual pedestrians began altering their nightly routes. Local businesses noticed a subtle drop in foot traffic in areas near the alley, their patrons cautious after dark. The city that once exuded vibrancy now bore a collective tension, a nervous energy that seemed to hum beneath the surface of daily life. Every unfamiliar face, every fleeting shadow, every sudden noise was viewed with suspicion. Austin had become a city wide awake, alert to the hidden dangers that now felt closer than ever. Forensics teams worked tirelessly, analyzing the minor physical evidence left behind. Samples of hair, fabric fibers, and soil from the alley were collected and sent for testing. Investigators examined the patterns of footprints, using plaster casts to preserve their dimensions. Tire tracks were photographed, measured, and compared to databases of known vehicles in the area. DNA analysis was conducted on the faint stain found on the ground, while microscopic examination sought trace evidence invisible to the naked eye. Each piece of data added to the growing, yet incomplete, picture of the incident. The meticulous attention to detail highlighted the painstaking nature of solving crimes. Every clue had to be cross-referenced, verified, and interpreted carefully to avoid false leads or wasted efforts. The emotional toll on the community was equally profound. Friends and family of the missing woman replayed the last moments she had been seen, analyzing phone calls, texts, and social media activity for anything that might hint at the perpetrator. Anxiety, guilt, and helplessness gnawed at them. They wondered if they had missed a warning sign, or if a casual remark or seemingly trivial behavior might have prevented the incident. As days stretched into nights, the emptiness of not knowing created a persistent ache, a vacuum filled with fear, suspicion, and grief. Each unanswered question amplified the psychological burden on everyone connected to the event, turning familiar spaces into reminders of vulnerability. Detectives maintained constant communication with local media, careful to release only verified information, knowing that the spread of rumors could complicate the investigation. Press conferences emphasized the importance of community cooperation, urging anyone with potential knowledge to come forward. Yet the media coverage also intensified the emotional weight for the public, spreading awareness of the unknown perpetrator and heightening collective unease. Social media platforms buzzed with speculation, theories, and shared fears, amplifying the citywide tension. Every new report, every sighting, and every update from law enforcement contributed to a pervasive sense of vulnerability. The city had learned that danger could strike silently and without warning, anywhere, to anyone. By the end of the first week, investigators were exhausted but undeterred, methodically piecing together the fragments of evidence and witness accounts. The perpetrator remained elusive, leaving behind only traces, shadows, smudges, fragments that hinted at a presence, but never confirmed identity or motive. The case became a symbol of invisible menace, a reminder that violence could seep into the everyday world unnoticed, leaving behind permanent marks on both individuals and the community. Residents walked with heightened awareness, friends checked in obsessively, and strangers passed each other warily on the streets at night. The investigation, while technical and methodical, revealed something deeper: the fragility of safety, the omnipresence of risk, and the psychological consequences of a crime that left no immediate answers. The city of Austin, vibrant and lively by day, now carried a quiet vigilance. Police continued to follow leads, forensic teams analyzed every trace, and detectives tirelessly reconstructed events, hoping to bridge the gap between fragments of evidence and the truth. And for those who lived near the alley, every step on the pavement, every shadow cast by street lamps, every distant sound carried the memory of what had occurred, a moment of fear so intense it had left an invisible mark on the city's collective consciousness. The investigation, meticulous and methodical, was not just about solving a crime. It became a lens through which the community confronted vulnerability, mortality, and the unseen forces that could transform ordinary life into a nightmare in an instant. News of her disappearance spread quickly, first among friends and neighbors, then across Austin's social media channels, local news outlets, and radio broadcasts. By the early morning, a sense of collective dread had settled over the city. The story dominated headlines, each report adding a layer of fear and sorrow. For those who had known her, even casually, the news was a jarring shock. Families, friends, and acquaintances were caught in a tangled web of emotions: disbelief, terror, helplessness, and a gnawing sense of guilt. The questions were relentless and unanswerable. Could I have done something? Should I have been there? Did anyone else notice the danger I missed? These questions haunted them, replaying in the mind like a broken record, amplifying grief with every thought. Her family's reaction was immediate and visceral. Parents and siblings rushed to the scene, to the streets she had walked, to the alley that had swallowed her from sight. Each corner, each brick wall, each shadowed doorway was examined with desperate scrutiny. Friends gathered in homes, sharing frantic phone calls, checking messages repeatedly, hoping for a single sign that she was safe. Each unanswered call or text became a cruel reminder of the uncertainty that now dominated their lives. Their minds were in a state of constant replay, going over every interaction, every word, every small detail from the night, searching for some overlooked clue, some missed warning. Anxiety wrapped around them like a vice, tightening with each passing hour, leaving exhaustion and despair in its wake. The community also reacted en masse. Candlelight vigils sprang up in the streets where she had last been seen. Residents, many of whom had never known her personally, left flowers, notes, and small personal items near the alley and surrounding sidewalks. Each candle's flickering flame reflected both hope and grief, tiny beacons in a city suddenly shrouded in a shadow of uncertainty. Strangers embraced one another in shared sorrow, tears running freely down cheeks that had not known them before. Local musicians gathered to play samba melodies, their tunes carrying across empty streets, amplifying the collective sadness, while journalists and photographers documented the vigils with quiet reverence, capturing the city's emotional pulse. Social media amplified the intensity of the situation. Posts shared her photo, her last known movements, and accounts of the struggle in the alley. Online communities debated theories, shared potential sightings, and expressed horror at the thought of such violence occurring in their own city. While some posts were helpful, urging caution and sharing safety advice, others spread speculation, exaggeration, or false leads, creating an overwhelming flood of information that blurred fact and fiction. Friends and family sifted through this digital noise, clinging to anything that might hint at hope while simultaneously being tormented by every negative comment, every unconfirmed sighting. The emotional toll of living in this dual reality, between hope and despair, rumor and fact, left the city in a state of collective anxiety that few had experienced before. Her closest friends oscillated between frantic searching and paralyzing grief. They revisited the last night they had seen her, dissecting conversations, analyzing expressions, even the smallest gestures. Guilt gnawed at them, a relentless ache. They questioned their own actions. Could we have persuaded her not to walk home alone? Did we notice something unusual and dismiss it? Sleep became elusive as the human mind struggled to cope with uncertainty, the lack of closure making the emotional pain almost unbearable. Each day without news felt like a slow erosion of hope, each hour a deepening of despair. Even mundane tasks became heavy, as if the weight of anxiety pressed down upon every movement, every thought, and every interaction. The psychological impact extended beyond her immediate circle. Residents of Austin felt a creeping unease that altered their daily routines. People walked faster at night, often glancing over their shoulders, scanning the shadows that had once gone unnoticed. Parents called their children more frequently, checked windows, locked doors, and installed additional security measures. Community centers and neighborhood groups held meetings to discuss safety measures, shared alerts, and encouraged vigilance. The city, usually celebrated for its openness and liveliness, seemed smaller, constrained by fear, as though every alley and street corner now carried the weight of potential danger. The disappearance had transformed not just her life, but the daily consciousness of an entire city. Media coverage intensified the emotional impact. Reporters interviewed family members, friends, and local residents, capturing the depth of collective fear and grief. News broadcasts showed footage of empty alleys, wet pavement, flickering lamplight, and the locations where vigils had been held. Each segment reminded the city of its vulnerability, of how quickly normalcy could be shattered by a single act of violence. Discussions on airwaves and social media focused on prevention, the psychology of criminal intent, and the persistent danger that lurked in the unseen corners of the urban landscape. The coverage amplified the sense of urgency and tension, embedding the story deep into the city's consciousness. Despite this overwhelming despair, moments of community solidarity emerged. Volunteers joined police searches, distributing flyers and checking surveillance footage. Local business owners allowed their cameras to be reviewed, provided lighting for searches, and offered support for the grieving family. The city, though fearful, found brief reprieves in these collective efforts, small sparks of hope amid the darkness. Each act of assistance, each shared concern, became a statement of human resilience, a reminder that even in the face of unspeakable tragedy, communities could unite in grief and determination. Yet, at the core, the emotional fallout was devastating. Families, friends, and neighbors were left suspended in a liminal space of uncertainty, haunted by questions that had no answers. Fear, grief, guilt, and helplessness intertwined, forming a dense emotional fog that clouded everyday life. The city itself seemed to hold its breath, aware that safety was fragile and that violence could strike anywhere, at any time. The disappearance had left a void not just in the life of one person, but in the heart of a city, a lingering echo of vulnerability, fragility, and loss that would be felt for months, even years, to come. Weeks turned into months, and while the streets of Austin seemed outwardly unchanged, the invisible scars of that night lingered in the collective consciousness of the city. Daylight brought routine back to some areas, with traffic humming along familiar routes and pedestrians moving purposefully to and from work, unaware of the lingering tension that permeated quieter streets. Yet beneath this veneer of normalcy, a quiet vigilance had taken hold. Parents called home multiple times a day to check on their children, neighbors exchanged whispered warnings about darkened alleys, and residents walked home with eyes constantly scanning every corner, every shadow, every flicker of movement that might indicate hidden danger. The city had learned, in a visceral and permanent way, that safety was fragile, an illusion easily shattered by unseen malice. The investigation, though relentless, offered no closure. Police continued to comb through evidence, tirelessly reviewing surveillance footage, re-interviewing witnesses, and revisiting the alley in hopes of new leads. Forensic specialists reanalyzed fibers, soil samples, and tire tracks, applying advanced techniques that had not been available during the initial search. Detectives reconstructed timelines, cross-referenced phone records, and reached out to nearby cities to track any suspicious activity. Yet despite these efforts, the perpetrator remained elusive, leaving behind only shadows, traces, and unanswered questions. Each dead end amplified frustration and helplessness, not only for law enforcement but also for a city desperate for reassurance that the danger had been neutralized. The psychological impact on the community persisted. Residents who had once walked freely through the streets now experienced a subtle, pervasive anxiety. Simple activities, taking a late-night stroll, visiting a friend, or retrieving groceries after dark, became laden with tension. Every alley, every poorly lit corner, every quiet street felt like a potential stage for unseen threats. Some adjusted their daily routines entirely, avoiding areas where the incident had occurred, while others installed security cameras, alarm systems, or relied on escorts to mitigate fear. The city's nocturnal rhythm, once characterized by vibrancy and social life, was altered permanently. Music from open venues seemed softer, laughter less carefree, and shadows that once felt innocuous now carried the weight of possibility, of danger unseen but deeply felt. Her family's pain persisted like a slow, unrelenting tide. The absence of closure created a void heavier than any physical wound, an emotional chasm that no words or gestures could fill. Days were punctuated by a gnawing uncertainty. Would she return? Was she still alive? Had the perpetrator moved on, leaving her lost in an invisible labyrinth? The unanswered questions became psychological companions, as constant and oppressive as the passage of time. Friends and loved ones replayed memories endlessly, searching for moments that might hold answers, analyzing conversations and gestures, every small interaction now magnified in significance. Sleep was elusive, haunted by imagined scenarios and fears that the city itself might share, a collective manifestation of anxiety and grief. Community gatherings, once spontaneous and cheerful, now carried an undertone of caution. Candlelight vigils continued, though fewer in number, symbolizing remembrance as much as fear. Each flame represented hope, grief, and defiance against an unknown threat, a fragile reminder that the city would not forget what had occurred. Streets once filled with carefree laughter and the lively buzz of nightlife were now tinged with careful observation, every passerby a potential witness or suspect in the collective imagination. Children were warned repeatedly about strangers, alleys, and seemingly ordinary dangers, and adults navigated the city with heightened awareness, their instincts sharpened by the memory of a tragedy that had entered their lives without warning. Local media revisited the story repeatedly, marking anniversaries, exploring theories, and highlighting community efforts to prevent future incidents. Each feature reminded the city of its vulnerability, while also emphasizing resilience and solidarity. Social media carried ongoing discussions, from speculations about the perpetrator to shared memories of the missing woman, maintaining her presence in the collective memory. Yet while these narratives honored her existence and encouraged vigilance, they also served as a reminder that some crimes leave indelible scars, and some questions remain unanswered indefinitely. The city learned to live in the tension between remembrance and uncertainty, vigilance and normalcy. The physical traces of the incident also contributed to the lingering shadow. The alley itself became a place of caution. Walls, pavement, and surrounding structures were scrutinized more closely, and pedestrian traffic decreased at night. Streetlights were examined and repaired, and local authorities implemented additional safety measures, from increased patrols to the installation of security cameras. Yet these measures, while practical, could not erase the emotional imprint left behind. Every person who walked those streets carried the memory of what had happened, an invisible awareness that transformed perception of space, time, and ordinary movement. The city itself seemed to hold its breath in that alley, a silent monument to a night that would never be forgotten. Months later, residents still described the feeling as a shadow, a presence that was unseen, unquantifiable, yet undeniably real. It manifested as a subtle hesitation, a tightened grip on a child's hand, a skipped step into darkness, a glance over a shoulder at a corner that had once been ignored. The disappearance had altered Austin's rhythm, creating an invisible tension that lingered in homes, workplaces, streets, and hearts. Even as new events, celebrations, and daily life unfolded, the memory of that night persisted, a ghost of uncertainty that reminded the community of life's fragility. The lingering shadow was not just a physical or geographical reality, it was psychological, emotional, and cultural. It had seeped into the way people thought about safety, trust, and proximity. Neighbors formed tighter bonds, checking on one another more diligently. Friends altered routines to accommodate caution. City planners and law enforcement considered safety in every decision, knowing that public spaces must not only feel safe but be practically secure. The story of the disappearance became both cautionary tale and collective trauma, a shared memory that shaped Austin's identity and the consciousness of its residents. In the end, life continued, but forever marked by uncertainty. The streets resumed their daily rhythms, the city's heartbeat continued, and business, music, and social life persisted. Yet beneath the surface, the invisible shadow remained, a testament to the night when fear emerged unannounced and violence touched ordinary life. The disappearance had left an enduring lesson, that safety is fragile, that evil can strike quietly, and that some wounds, emotional, psychological, and communal, never fully heal. The city remembered, and in remembering, it carried a subtle, unshakable tension, a quiet vigilance, and a somber respect for the unseen forces that can transform life in an instant.